Well, as of this recording, we have 6 new accusers against Diddy. By the time you hear this or see this, there's probably more because the floodgates have indeed opened. Joining me to discuss, Robin Dreeke, retired FBI special agent, chief of the counterintelligence behavioral analysis program. Let's talk about this. The floodgates are open. We have 6 new accusers that have been thoroughly vetted that we can tell from Tony Busby, the attorney that's bringing these. He's also threatening to bring 120 more cases. Um, this is a big thing right now. There's a lot of people. There's volume going against Diddy, and obviously, there's a call. Believe the accusers. Believe the victims. And I do believe in that, but we have to make sure that the victims are also telling the truth and they're not just making something up to kind of get on this bandwagon, because inevitably there's going to be a lot of people trying to do
Mhm.
this. What are some of the things you would say, as a behavioralist, as we look at these people that are bringing these suits, to kind of recognize, does this follow the pattern of Diddy? Does this not? How do we tell what's likely legit and what's not? Ultimately, a jury's going to decide that. But I mean, I could see a lot of things getting mixed in here that maybe don't have a lot of elements to truth to them.
Yeah, the first thing you're gonna do is they're gonna be just looking for congruency of stories.
Hmm.
And so what's gonna happen is, you know, Diddy has a pattern, a life arc of his behavior, which becomes very predictable. Everyone's life arc becomes predictable. And likewise, accusers' stories are also going to have a predictable pattern as well of claims, timelines, events, things that happen, specific details. And so, as an investigator, you interview people independently without knowledge, each other having knowledge of each other's stories, corroborate them. Because, yeah, you are going to have people that are going to try to jump on that bandwagon and make all these accusations or inflate or exaggerate. And so, to weed those out from the legitimate ones is just going to be that. It's just going to be, is this following a pattern of behavior that is congruent with all the other accusers? And especially going to find one that's going to be the most credible. It's going to be credibility from their background, credibility from the story, credibility from evidence being able to provide. And so that one spark of super credible accuser will then set the pattern by which you're going to measure others by.
Let me ask you about that, because trying to find the pattern, trying to find some congruency here. This is not where there's just one case out there. This is not where these
Right.
cases are sealed and we don't know the details of them. We're getting into, 20, 30, 40 suits now that are out there in the public, that either have been settled or are ongoing, and more are coming in. We're probably going to be in the hundreds here soon that do have similar stories, but it's not impossible now to take a look at the other stories that have come in and the other accusations against Diddy and say, that's my story too. Exact same thing happened to me. How do investigators battle that to determine if this is just someone? It's not easy. I mean, it is easy rather to just say a similar thing happened to me, um, versus my real experience. How do we determine the reality between fact and fiction here?
I can't speak for them, but I'll speak for what I would do
Hmm.
and what I had to do in
Yeah,
situations like this where and this is going to be just a lot of ground truth for me,
yeah.
is when you're trying to filter, because that's what's happening right now. If you have a limited number of investigators and you have an overwhelming number of cases and an overwhelming number of potential victims, you're going to have to start weeding them out somehow. Not weeding them out, but you're going to have to start prioritizing. I should say it's a better word to start
Mhm.
prioritizing. And you're going to prioritize them based on the amount of evidence that each one of these people is able to provide. And so if you have someone so if you have 100 people that are claiming exactly the same things, all credible stories, everything, the only thing you can do is, as an investigator, you're going to bring it to a prosecutor. And what the prosecutors are going to be looking for is hard, very tangible data points and evidence that'll most likely lead to a conviction, because prosecutors don't want to waste time's a bad word too. Prosecutors are going to prioritize cases that they know are going to get a guilty conviction from their own point of view.
Mhm.
That's why when you go to federal court, that's why the overwhelming number of federal cases are found guilty,
Mhm.
because prosecutors have so many things that they can be prosecuting. They're only going to pick the ones that have the highest probability of success, and the highest probability of success are the ones that have a lot of hard evidence, video, photographs, um, medical exams, other eyewitnesses potentially that
Mhm.
can corroborate. So they're going to be filtering those and categorizing them according to number of actual data and actual evidence being brought forward. And so that's what as that's me having worked with and other investigators, having worked my own cases, having worked with prosecutors where we had what we thought were extremely righteous cases, really important cases, brought it to a prosecutor, an assistant U.S. attorney that said, I agree with you, but I have this caseload over here that is really high priority as well. Here's the bar I need you to meet.
Mhm.
And here's the evidence I'm going to need in order to move yours up this line of priority. That's reality, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's fascinating. The process of how all of that works. There has been a new statement as of today, as of our recording, from Diddy's attorneys. They are now asking for the names of those who are accusing him, so they can essentially they're arguing so they can prepare for effective trials. What do you think of that? I mean, a lot of people file this stuff anonymously for protection because they don't want to be persecuted. They don't want their names out there. If they are the victim of these crimes, they shouldn't have to have their name out there if they are the victim. But the Diddy crew is saying, nope, we want to know the names. The judge is yet to decide on any of this. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd be scared.
Yeah.
As a, for the prosecutor, I wouldn't want those names out there either. I mean, and one of the reasons why, again, this is pure Robin Dreeke's conjecture on this. One of the reasons why the judge has denied bail is because of potential jury tampering issues. And so, if the reason why they didn't want Diddy have bail is it wasn't necessarily fear of flight or risk of flight, but the jury tampering issue, the last thing you want to do is, or witness tampering, I should say, not jury tampering, the witness tampering issue. The last thing you want to do is let them know all the witnesses. So
Yeah.
I would think the judge isn't going to rule on that. And also, if you want more people to be inspired to come forward, you have to allow them to feel safe in which to do
Yeah.
so that there won't be reciprocity because they still don't know. And like you said, the floodgates are opening and not yet. What you have is you have a small crack in a dam, and there's some water starting to trickle through it. The amount of water that gets through is going to determine the amount of erosion around the sides. They're going to see if it can be more volume coming through.
Hmm.
But if there is a good defense attorney or person plugging up the holes as they're trickling through, the water's not going to get worse coming through.
True.
And so and what those plugs are is feelings of unsafe presented by Diddy and the crew because people still don't exactly know, I think, exactly the reach he has even behind bars
Hmm.
and is on that network that can still submarine you, your career, your reputation. And also people that might be inspired to come forward to be a witness were probably doing things that they're going to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
And that's the other challenge here when dealing with and working with people that and we deal this all the time with children that are victimized by predators is educating and informing and allowing a child or a victim to feel safe and not ashamed of their behavior and let them know and be embraced by the fact that they were victimized. There is no shame in being victimized. And so I think that's going to be part of this too is how do you get that message out there that there's no shame because you were victimized, because a lot of times people that have been victimized think it's their fault.
Sure.
I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have made that choice or decision. It's all my fault. And they're ashamed of those choices they made. But at the same time, no, you went there under good intentions and you were victimized while you were there.
I think it's going to be a difficult thing for a lot of people, especially well-known people, celebrities, and such that
Mhm.
participated in some of these things, because I think there is probably a lot of shame there if they look back on maybe either some of their younger days, some of their more inexperienced days, or some of the days where they were just flat out drugged at the party, because we see the allegations in that of possibly GHB being in some of the baby oil or some sort of drug, which would lower a person's inhibitions and their decision making skills. If one was at one of these parties thinking, oh, this is going to be some sort of sex thing, and I'm into that if that's what they're into. But if they're assuming it was all legal on the up and up, maybe didn't know where these people came from or that they were trafficked. Um, if they did participate, if they were drugged, if they were under the influence, that's going to be a big content or big point of shame
Mhm.
for them to look back and go, "Oh my God, I can't believe I did that." I mean, it's like if you look back on a younger day when you drank too much or something, you did something stupid. Not saying rape, but I'm just saying, we all have done dumb things. You have shame, and if something involved that, or not even rape, but just having consensual sex, but it turns out it ended up being with someone underage and you didn't know it, or it was a sex worker or something of that nature, there's going to be so much shame. And it's not so much just the shame that they don't want to harm their image and just the public perception of them, but I think it opens them up to lawsuits probably then from from the sex workers, from whoever may have been there. Um, and they don't want to open up themselves to that sort of liability, although at the same time, they may have also been a victim. I'm specifically speaking more so for some of the younger folks who are in the circle of Diddy. I was talking with Banfield the other night on News Nation. We were talking about this specifically. And I want to say this: there's been no accusations, no solid evidence, nothing about Justin Bieber being at any of these parties or that he was participating. But there's a lot of accusations that have floated out there. Let's just say theoretically he was at some of these parties. Incomplete theory. This is just conjecture. He was someone who was groomed by Diddy from the age of like 14 on up to think this was normal, this was life. And this is the guy you're looking up to as the leader in the industry. And he's bringing you into his parties, and you were drugged too. And you end up participating in some of the stuff. Again, just conjecture, not any evidence behind any of that. That to me looks like someone who's also been victimized by Diddy, but then also possibly, depending on what happened, could end up victimizing others. We see this quite often with abuse victims. Again, not saying that's what happened, but let's just, for example, say that that is something that happened, whether it be someone like a Bieber or somebody else who was young, impressionable, groomed, and then into that situation. That's a whole other dynamic.
Yeah, and it's a very accurate dynamic in how these things work. I mean, this is how cults work.
Hmm.
When you have someone that indoctrinates you and gets you over that initial hurdle because you're groomed into thinking this is going to be normal behavior, and then once you do it once, and then it's all validated, that behavior is validated by the group think around you, so the next time you do it, it's no longer a big deal, and that just becomes part of what's normal behavior for them, even though it might be abhorrent behavior for the culture and society at large
Yeah.
because of the destructive nature of the relationships and the behaviors. I the recent example of the John Doe that was talking about how he was excited to finally go to a white party,
Yeah.
and the claim is that Diddy said, "Pull down your pants," and his private parts get cupped and held, and he thought it was horrible, but the way that Diddy presented it was so normal. This is what we normally do, and so I guarantee you that after that first time like that, it became less of a shock
Yeah.
if it was done again and becomes normalized and accepted by the people around you. So then it becomes even then more tempting if someone tells you to now do that and go indoctrinate someone else because you know how it's done. You're a part of this. And so again, your mindset, when you're surrounded by a lot of people that are saying this is normal behavior, become part of your norm until someone comes in and says, "Hey," which they all needed desperately, was a loving critic and say, "This is not normal. This is not healthy, and this is destroying lives."
It's amazing what the human mind can tell itself as being this is normal. This is part of how this
Yes.
works with not that much suggestion. I mean, really, I mean, it's more so if someone has the power and that's a place you want to get to, and that person is saying this is what you need to do, as absurd as it may be to the rest of normal society, people oftentimes will go, oh, well, this must be part of the secret. This must be part of what goes on behind the scenes. That to me is kind of shocking, even though I accept it. It's real, but it is shocking just how quickly we can adapt to say, oh, this is how it goes.
All right, so I'm gonna throw the curveball in here from history.
Yeah.
So us as a species, we've been around hundreds of thousands of years, close to like a 1.2 million, I think, as Homo sapiens compared to, and we're the youngest out of the Homo erectus, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthals, so we're one of the species of Homo. And so if you look at that span, and recorded history goes back probably tens of, 10 about 10, 15, 20,000 years tops, where we were actually written down and can record and find evidence of our cognitive thought processes. So you look at that evolution, right? So you're thinking that we're really evolved today. We wouldn't do these things like the ancient tribal man. Well, only about 400 to 500 years ago, we were burning witches at the stake
And in some places, they still do.
because of groupthink,
Yeah.
because of the myths that we tell ourselves as a species that allowed us to coalesce together beyond a tribe of 150
Yeah.
to go into larger groups. We coalesced around urban legends. We coalesced around stories that we told ourselves and mythology and all these things so that we could collectively come together for group survival, but also to our detriment. It's amazing what the human brain can do. Robert Greene, as you and I have mentioned numerous times, the laws of human nature
Mhm.
is that we consume information that validates our own self opinion. If you've been indoctrinated that your self opinion is X, Y, and Z, you're going to constantly consume information and surround yourself by people that are going to validate that self opinion. It becomes part of the most important thing to us as a human being is our identity.
Yeah.
And when someone tries ripping that identity away, it's extremely disturbing, and we fight back against it, and we don't want to know about it. So we hide. And so that's why we surround ourselves by people that validate that self opinion. That's why grooming into these horrendous group things to the individual inside it, they don't see it because they don't have an optic from that outside in.
That's true. Optics are so important when dealing with anything like this. Let's talk about Kanye West. He has been brought up, named in a civil suit recently involving Diddy, mainly focusing on Kanye, from a former assistant of his, saying that he took her to a Diddy party, and at this party, he sexually assaulted her. That, according to the allegations against him. So this would be one of our first big names, I think, that has dropped. That it's not in the federal indictment. This is in a complete civil case. Of course, Kanye denying all of this, saying they've been battling this person forever and accusations and slanderous, blah 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 blah. Could be completely slanderous. Could be completely an accusation that goes absolutely nowhere. We don't know yet. It is just that. But this would be the first of some big names that found the environment of a Diddy party to be a place where it would be acceptable to maybe engage in this kind of behavior, bringing his assistant to it. And then this happens, allegedly. What's your thoughts on this? Is this something that we're going to see more of, where it seems maybe celebrities brought their underlings, and I'm not trying to say that in any sort of negative way, but she was an assistant of his, so that would be under him in the way of the business structure, and probably also very intimidating. And you get into an environment where people are having sex with everybody. Um, Things can happen, and the idea of a sexual assault taking place in that environment, it's not going to be noticed at all. It's going to look like this is something else that's just kind of going on in this party.
People bring people to places where they feel safe doing things.
Yeah.
And Diddy created an environment where unhealthy, abhorrent behavior was safe for the people that wanted to commit it and became a focal point for that. And when you use the levers of influence and manipulation like fear, control, power, the enticements of the material world, of pleasures, and people, again, our motivations as human being is we want to do things that allow us to feel safe. And if you have a deviant mindset of what it is you want to do that is really not good, like sexually assaulting people, destroying lives, all these things, but you feel you found a place you can do these things, these hedonistic things, and get away with it because you feel safe there, it's going to gravitate towards it. We just want to do things that allow us to feel safe for our behavior. Luckily,
Yeah.
we have this thing called law and order that keeps those things from happening until you get a tribe mentality that kind of coalesce, and that tribe mentality is able to foster and grow because of the resources they have in which to do it, which is power, which is the greatest resource he was using. Money allowed him to have that power, but that power and influence was the resource that allowed it to happen.
What I find interesting about the whole thing is that it took place on Diddy's land, in Diddy property, and in Diddy world, and Diddy sex land, whatever the fuck it is. And it wasn't something. I mean, this is an assistant, so I'm sure they're in many situations where it's the two of them together in a more private setting. Why he felt comfortable to do it in that sort of setting, but I think that's just it. It was an open place for this to happen. He might have not felt safe doing this in a more, it's strange, like in a more private environment, or something where there wouldn't be other people around. This was at a party, of his. It just seems bizarre to think that this is the safe environment, but that's how bizarre this all is. Diddy created an environment where it was safe for sexual assault on a mass scale.
It was the accepted norm.
Yeah.
I mean, let's take a very altruistic, nice look, not at Diddy, but other ways in which people do this. So, um, my family and I just went to the Renaissance Fair in Maryland,
Yeah.
and at the Renaissance Fair in Maryland, it's the largest on the East Coast. People dress up, and you have some funny characters. You have, it's like Halloween, and people acting out their old British accents and English. I mean, it's a hoot, right?
Mhm.
Same thing go to Disney World. Kids show up in costumes,
Yep.
and so these are types of behaviors and accents and things you wouldn't do outside of the Renaissance Fair
Sure.
because you'd feel awkward. You wouldn't feel safe. You'd feel like you're being ridiculed and accused and not felt accepted for that behavior outside that environment. But because the Renaissance Fair creates an environment of safety for those behaviors, which are healthy and fun and entertaining, you can do it there. Outside of there, no.
Yeah.
Same thing. So Diddy created his own Diddy Fair.
Sexual
Uh,
renaissance fair.
exactly what
Yeah.
happened. So
Yeah.
people only will feel safe doing those horrendous behaviors inside a Diddy world.
Yeah. That's true. Because if you've ever run into those Renaissance people who take it really hardcore at like the Piggly Wiggly, they're weird.
But you get them inside their environment,
It's
and all of a sudden they
normal.
start
Yeah.
strutting around. The chest is
Yeah.
puffed out.
It's like, do you know where the bread is here? Well, fine, sir. It's past the, like, what is wrong with you? Yeah.
I've brought us down so many different angles today, whether we're talking about the 1500s and burning witches or the Renaissance Fair. But it's
Yeah.
all human behavior
It
over
is.
periods.
Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.